right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I have, of course, our guest Carsten Kneip with us, who I'm going to introduce to you shortly. Before we get started, one thing to keep in mind, I already had one question from someone who on the invite, although that question is actually embedded into the questions I have prepared for Carsten. But if you have a question, and people always have questions, and you're on Zoom, use the Q&A interface. If you're on LinkedIn Live, and hopefully Daniel has got us all coordinated on LinkedIn Live, it's a lot harder for me to see your questions, so it's always better to use the Zoom interface for question answering. But in any case, here we go. So I'm going to launch the webinar again. Use the Q&A. If you have a question, we'll be addressing those at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carsten here. I think I first met you, Carsten, when you were at Microsoft years ago. But in any case, Carsten's the leader over at Smartsheet. He's built the localization program for the ground up. There was something going on before he showed up, but he really kind of built the organization. And he brings a lot of years of experience in localization and program management. Worked at Microsoft, Lionbridge, and Cisco, all names that we know over the years. Certainly Microsoft is, in my mind, sort of the big daddy of localization, since they had to really develop some of the processes themselves in the early 90s. He focuses on building strong processes, connecting teams, and making localization run smoothly across product development. All right. With that, we're going to find out a little bit more from Carsten's mouth of the situation. First of all, can you describe your current role at Smartsheet and the structure of your team?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, Adam. I see a lot of familiar names in the audience. Hello to everybody. You know who you are. So my current role at Smartsheet and the structure of the team, well, formally, I'm the Director of Localization at Smartsheet. The team is a centralized team, and we sit in the digital marketing organization. I know there's always this question, where should a localization team sit? There's never a right or wrong answer, right? I'm sure some of you sit in product organizations, some of you sit also in marketing organizations, some of you might sit in a sales organization, who knows? There's all kinds of varieties out there. Just for reference, at my years at Microsoft, I was always in a product organization. Anyway, so we are a central team. We are responsible for the entire localization infrastructure, the vendor relationships. We also manage the budget for all the other organizations and the overall localization processes. So in short, I mean, we run localization at Smartsheet. The team itself, we're a very small team, actually, including myself. There's 4 FTEs that look after localization company-wide. I know some of you probably run a one-man show, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, compared to the size of other teams, we are fairly small. And needless to say, with the small amount of people, we heavily rely on outsourcing. We have a strong LSP partnership in place, and that's really key to our strategy.
All right. Here we go. All right. Well, let's go back in time here. When you first started at Smartsheet, what was the state of localization when you first joined?
Yeah, going back in time, going back to the dark COVID times, actually. So I started at Smartsheet in late 2021. I think it was late November, early December. And then the first thing I did, of course, once you start a new job, the first thing you do is go on vacation. So I went on my Christmas break and I didn't do anything until I came back in early 2022. But joking aside, so the state localization at Smartsheet was in, people joked during the interview process, they said it's really the Wild West of localization. And, as I pulled the curtain a little bit, I really quickly saw they weren't joking. Localization had been done for a while at Smartsheet. Actually, before I was even aware of Smartsheet, when I looked at their website, it was available in 8 languages. So I knew there was localization in place, but it turned out it was done very ad hoc and in a non-strategic way. So looking behind the curtain, I could see there was, let's say, what did not exist, right? So what did not exist was a centralized, a scalable and repeatable process. There was no centralized vendor management. There was virtually no in-house technology for localization. And there was zero coordination between teams, and that led to lack of glossary, style guides, etc. So you could say, going back to the Wild West description, each team kind of did their own thing. Each team knew they had to do some localization. And then even though there was a vendor in place, there was one, I should say, poor PM that was put in charge of running localization with no team, with no budget. So pretty much each team did their own thing, very uncoordinated. And in a nutshell, that was the state of localization.
It's funny. I'm on, of course, coming as an outsider perspective, as a vendor of technology and technical services, and I almost really, I actually really like to walk into a sales situation where they've tried, and they've learned how hard it is. You know what I mean? It's like if a group is brand new to localization, I mean, especially if you get a group of developers or senior managers in the room, like they're really smart. They'll figure this out, right? But they need to, almost endure a little bit of pain around the organization of it and the like, um, to be able to realize and start to optimize their situation. It's just human nature, you know. All right. Were you brought on board with a specific mission or objective in mind? I know I'm taking you back in time here.
Yeah, so to put it in simple words, I think I wouldn't call it mission, but the order was show us how to do localization, to summarize it, get us organized. And then, the question I was asked, what should we do? What should we do to get organized? Those were things that came up during the interview process. At a more formal level, Smartsheet at the time had a mission statement. It said to empower everyone to drive meaningful change, which is, very generic, but everyone, the word everyone kind of draw my attention because everyone easily goes with everyone everywhere. And I felt like that was the best angle to align a localization mission to the overall company mission. So actually empower everyone everywhere to drive meaningful change became the localization team's mission statement. So that's how we started.
Nice. Okay.
And then double clicking on that, the strategies, they're all centered around what I previously mentioned in terms of lack of infrastructure, lack of technology, lack of tools. Yeah, so going back to what the mission was, just get the shit done, basically.
Okay, got it. That's a technical term. All right. We need an like a 3-letter acronym for that. Get the shit done. GSD. All right. Did you encounter any resistance from other teams when you began implementing changes? If so, from whom and why? This is the kiss and tell one. Who pushed back?
Yeah, so as I said, localization was already in place. There were the product and some assets not very consistent, but you could say 8 languages were available, including US English. So that was the starting point. Now, the change wasn't really focused on, okay, let's do 10 additional languages to start with. The change was really process and technology driven. So I must say I was in a very fortunate position at the time. I think most stakeholders were actually longing for change. They had to do a localization on their own because there weren't any resources, and they didn't want to spend time on that. That wasn't their main job, to do localization. So when I came in, they probably thought, oh, there's this poor schmuck now who can take care of all the things that we don't want to do, which actually brought very little resistance to, me coming in saying, okay, we need to improve these processes, we need to bring in these tools. I think that was a welcome change for almost everybody.
Nice.
The other thing I want to mention is at the time, and different companies do this differently. At the time, we had company-wide OKRs and objectives, key results. So one of the OKRs was actually centered around international. It was at a time where Smartsheet really focused on international expansion. We had just opened offices in Japan and Germany, so there was really like this focus on international. And a company OKR is pretty powerful because the whole company knows about it and they know we have to meet these OKRs, right? So there were specific international growth goals in there. And it looks like we have another participant coming in. Marketing lingo port.
That's Kate.
Okay. Now I lost my train of thought. So the OKRs is something that the entire company was aware of, and the entire company knew that is something that was taken very seriously because this is something the entire company reports into.
Right.
But OKRs aside, to summarize, I was really encountered with very little resistance to change, and also, honestly, there wasn't much to change because there wasn't much in place. Yes, the localization, the languages were in place, but a lot of other things were lacking. So it was more like building it up rather than changing things, I would say.
Got it.
And that probably helped with, not encountering the resistance either.
Got it. All right. That's for many on this call, I imagine that's kind of an enviable situation. All right. We're going to get into that in the Q&A a little bit too. What were the key localization issues you faced across software development and other departments like marketing?
Yeah, so probably development is a good organization to start with because a lot of times it's seen as a very challenging part of localization. Interestingly, the dev org was relatively advanced in terms what they had set up, in terms of they had a localization pipeline in place already, a continuous localization pipeline. They had automation, pushing strings over to the vendor and pulling them back. The one issue I saw right off the bat was internationalization wasn't really a thing. It was all downstream localization focused. And I think the main evidence, so to speak, was, rather than focusing on doing it right at the source, there just wasn't anybody looking after this, right? But rather than shifting things left, as we say nowadays, there were contractors in place who actually fixed localization bugs, or I should say fixed international bugs that turned into localization bugs downstream in the various languages. And that to me right there showed me that there was a huge opportunity to improve things, to shift things left. And yeah, for some, probably something you love hearing, Adam, there was opportunity for some tooling, right? There's this tool called Globalizer. So yeah, there was an opportunity to bring automation in all of this. And that was a pretty easy sell to make, right? Okay, we can put in automation versus having a bunch of contractors doing manual fixes downstream. That was the argument at the time.
Got it. Very good. Very good. I was at a networking event last night that had nothing to do with localization, but the subject came up, and I have a question for that when we get to the Q&A, if there's time. I like to put audience questions first, but how did you go about solving those challenges? What worked?
Yeah, so
You went into that.
yeah. More going back to the basics. So the one thing that really worked too, technology aside, we'll talk about that in a minute, but just plain simple education, that didn't exist either. As I said, there was nobody looking after internationalization, no experts, nothing. So plain old, best practice sessions, creating internal documentation about best practices. That was one thing that was very welcomed, just because it didn't exist. And then the second aspect, the technology aspect, rather than having manual fixes downstream, we brought in the Globalizer platform to handle things in a more automated way.
Got it. Okay.
But yeah, I'm trying to think what else is there to say about this. I mean, I could probably fill a whole hour about talking about the whole rollout and stuff, but to summarize, I think we did a parallel approach. We did a bottom up and a top down approach. And what I mean by that is, we did the grassroots, really talking to individual development teams, finding teams who were interested in piloting things, teams that had internationalization issues. So we try to find the right grassroots partners. And then, the top-down approach, which you don't want to start with, but there are existing engineering processes in place. There's an engineering infrastructure in place for cross-org initiatives. One of the typical things, we're probably not alone with that, is accessibility. It's typically a cross-org initiative, and there's usually a process in place to kind of enforce compliance. So we just took advantage of that existing infrastructure, and internationalization became one of those top-down process requirements for the engineering organization.
Right, right. It's interesting that accessibility was kind of a hot topic earlier this year, just because some rules coming into effect right about now. I forgot the exact date.
Yeah,
And
I think it was last month. Yeah,
it's very parallel to internationalization.
it is.
So much so that we've actually had globalizer customers develop their own custom rule sets around some accessibility issues. You kind of can't get them all, but it's just an aside. All right, here we go. What technology? We kind of covered this, but let's just go over it again because there's more than globalizer for your life. What
Yeah,
technologies
so
did you introduce?
yeah, I mean, globalizer is limited to just the
Right,
engineering organization.
right, right,
So there's a lot more to say about all the other departments we
right.
support.
Mhm.
Um, so in addition to globalizer for the engineering organization, again going back to the basics a little bit,
Mhm.
I think I mentioned at the very beginning there wasn't much technology in place. And one of the things that didn't exist, there was no TMS, no in-house TMS. So that was one of the things that we brought on board. Now we opted for one of the off-the-shelf TMSs. I know there's a lot of options out there.
Right, right.
And
Including like
then,
many times a vendor will host a TMS, which is always interesting to me when companies choose to have the vendor host it versus their own organization.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, typically, we will talk about, the whole vendor
Right.
setup
We have a question coming up about that.
further down. Um, yeah, I think at the time we were more in favor of an LSP that's not really in the business of tooling, and logically a tooling company that is not owned by an LSP.
Mhm.
Um, and then along with the TMS setup, we have several repositories for different assets across the company. So the chosen TMS had all the connectors that we needed for these different
Mhm.
repositories. So
Got it.
that was a huge thing, right? It was kind of like the first time everything was kind of we were for the first time able to handle things in a really automated way. From the repository, things get pushed into the TMS, the vendor goes in, and things come back into the repository. So that was a huge thing at the time.
Got it. Got it.
And then, again, people saw this as an opportunity to get things streamlined and organized. So there really wasn't much resistance, to the second part of your questions, how were they received internally? I think everybody was thrilled that we had a TMS in place.
Uh-huh.
They
Uh-huh.
saw, how quote unquote cool it was to now have this end-to-end automation. The other thing, we have this wonderful tool in-house. It's called Smartsheet. There's also
Right.
a lot of things you can set up with Smartsheet. It's a work management tool, and we basically built our whole localization process on Smartsheet. So I always proudly say internally, the localization team at Smartsheet runs on Smartsheet. That was another thing. What else?
Let's go
The
on to the
last thing, one more thing, because people are probably surprised this hasn't come up yet. Usually these webinars turn into a AI session. Now, at the time, AI wasn't really a big thing, but MT definitely was. And also the existing infrastructure, the existing localization processes were all based on just human translation plain old human translation. So there was also a huge opportunity to introduce MT at the time, along with the introduction of the TMS. And yeah, that was another thing that was introduced, and of course received as a very welcome enhancement and cost reduction tool.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, the AI question is a big one for webinars. We'll actually have the plan is to have a really neat AI webinar in September for Lingoport.
Okay.
Skip August just because so many people are on vacation in August, but we've been doing a lot of research into AI processing for localism. Really interesting findings that we'll talk about, but that's for another time. All right, how did
Yeah,
you?
it's kind of funny that we're going back in time, actually, right? Like usually these
Yeah,
webinars are all about where we want to go.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, well, but I really wanted this webinar to be like, learn from somebody else's experience, you know. So here we go. How did you approach building your team? What skills or qualities were you specifically looking for?
Yes, since again, I keep emphasizing this, how small we are. We're still lucky that it's not just a one-man show, though.
Right, right.
I would say the focus was really on classic, classic, program project management skills, because that
Mhm.
was just important at the time. AI didn't really wasn't really a big thing, in 2022. So the
Got it.
focus
So
was really like we
are
needed
you
to get
saying?
we need. I'm sorry.
Are you saying that today you'd have AI handle some of the project management?
Oh yeah, certainly. And
Okay.
it's part of the localization process.
Mhm.
But at the time we needed to build the processes, right? So the talent focus was really on the classic program/project management, and then we really needed engineering skills. So we had one role that we hired into an engineering focused role that actually required coding skills, because we wanted to revamp things with the existing pipeline. So we needed somebody who could actually write some code around this and maintain the code.
Got it. Got it. I think I know who that is. Okay, good. Did you end up switching vendors at any point? And what criteria guided your localization vendor decision?
Yeah, that was actually one of the first things I looked at. There was a vendor in place. It was a relatively small LSP. They had worked for Smartsheet for quite some time, and I just felt it was time for a change. MT was just became a really huge thing. Um, I think even at the time, people were like, who still does just human translation? Nobody does that anymore. But I think Smartsheet wasn't anywhere near that, modernization of the translation workflow. So long story short, I thought it was a good time to kind of like run a full-blown RFP. What criteria guided the decision? Yeah, I would have to go a little bit into the details of the RFP process, how we ended up selecting the current LSP partner. But yeah, to make a long story short, I made all the stakeholders that were previously doing their own localization thing, I made them part of the process, basically. So I remember I started a draft of this document I wanted to send out to potential vendors. that we were looking at. And I said, rather than me writing all of this, I need everybody's requirements. So I worked with every single stakeholder across the company, and really I kind of forced them to write out their requirements, because I wanted them to feel like they have skin in the game, right? Yes, they didn't have to deal with localization anymore themselves, but they were still the interface between their teams and the localization team. So they were the extended localization project managers. So I thought it was extremely important to have them all on board, to have them on the same page. I didn't want to end up, and I know, vendor selection processes that can get emotional, and people have their own preferences. They have their own network, and then in their network, there are vendors that they prefer. Several stakeholders said, oh, have you talked to vendor XYZ? I know them really well. I know somebody who works there, and they're great. And there was a ideal situation, because I could just say, okay, let's have you be part of the process. So everybody wrote out their requirements. Initially we chose 5 LSPs, kind of like from small to large and everything in between. And then, we ran a typical procurement supported localization process, but with very specific localization requirements. After the initial round of 5, when the questions, the answers to, no, sorry, not the answers, when the presentations came back and the presentations were done, we had narrowed it down to 2. The 2 vendors we believed, would be the best fit, and the 2 that kind of like hit all the checkboxes on the scorecards. We did a test run. We chose a test project, kind of like a dummy handoff with those 2 vendors, just to get an idea how they handle things on their end. And then, as I said, MT, that was a big thing for most companies. We really wanted to see, what the LSP's thinking was around MT, how they would help us be successful with MT. Last but not least, of course, that wasn't the main criteria, but the 2 vendors we looked at towards the very end, they actually incorporated Smartsheet in their processes. Probably a very smart move. So we looked at all of this combined, and then we ended up choosing one partner in the end.
All right.
So yeah.
I think this is our last question. Are there still areas, whether in skills, processes, or technology, that you're aiming to strengthen at Smartsheet?
Yeah, we could probably fill the rest of the time with just talking about AI now, right? I think it's clear that that's where this is going.
Well, I didn't say AI here. Whatever you think.
So we have a well-established tech stack now, and fast forwarding to today, now we're kind of like stepping out of the past. We are fully equipped with workflows that incorporate AI QE, AI PE, and other AI supported workflows. So I feel like we're in a pretty good spot, also thanks to our LSP partnership. But I would say the one thing, this area of AI, what seems to be the status quo today is not necessarily the status quo of next week. So in terms of skills, we need to stay on top of things, right? Like we need to be all over this, in terms of what's out there, what's being used, what's being offered, and that's really a big focus area for us right now. Even though we are in a good spot, we don't want to get too comfortable with where we're at. right? Um,
Right, right. Well, certainly there's a lot to talk about regarding approaches to prompting. I won't say training because training's hard, uh,
mm,
but approaches to prompting that we've been working on to automate and the like. You're right. I mean, it's a changing world, and the really wild thing is that sometimes you get for different things maybe simpler results for less money on like an older version of let's say Chat GPT for specifically rather than the 4.0 like the little
mhm,
one. Um, uh, but that's it's like you really ought to keep up with that, and it's probably hard on the you mentioned your organization, you can't like devote a person to that, so
yeah,
uh, it's interesting. We do have somebody devoted to that right now, but anyway, we'll talk about that more in a later series of both blog posts and webinars. So stay tuned. All right, this is the point at which we open up for audience questions. We have one already. Um, I like it very much. You mentioned, and I think you can see this as a panelist, Karsten. So
yeah. I just
okay,
clicked
good.
on the Q&A.
So
Yep.
I'll just read it aloud. You mentioned that your localization processes are built within Smartsheet, which is impressive. Yes, it is. I'm curious, are you also tracking any localization health metrics within Smartsheet, particularly quality related ones? If so, could you share which quality metrics you focus on and whether you've set up dashboards to monitor them?
Mm. So let me start by saying what we are monitoring. For we have a very and this is might be unusual these days when everything is centered around AI. We still have a very classic LQA program in place with our LSP. And of course, they do now also AI supported, but they still do the typical scoring, the MQM scoring.
Mhm.
So we get monthly scoring per language, and that data is all put in their Tableau data warehouse. And uh, Smartsheet has a connector with Tableau, so I pull that data out of Tableau and present it in a nice Smartsheet chart.
Mhm. Got it. Got it. Are you looking at distance to edit as well, or?
We do, yeah. That's the other metric we look at. Uh,
Mhm.
Monitor that over time to see where additional engine training is required. Yeah, that's another metric we have in place.
Okay. Okay.
Also pulled from the Tableau warehouse from the LSP.
Right. Right. So, it's interesting just because Tableau is yet another technology that's not built for localization, but
Mhm.
gets the job done, in
Yeah,
terms of data warehousing.
yeah. And then beyond quality, we also do the financial tracking through that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Got it. Got it. Um, it's interesting because in many organizations I've seen over time where they build their own tools in-house. They don't have Smartsheet as a starting ground as a common issue. So I think it's different. But then 5 years later they're kind of still dragging it around, and staff may have changed, and it actually becomes a bit of a challenge. I could see because you make Smartsheet, that's not necessarily the same situation. Um, all right. I was at this.
I do want to mention one thing that
Yeah.
just popped into my head that I think is worth mentioning here. Um, through this partnership with our LSP,
Uh-huh.
our LSP also became a Smartsheet customer. So it was kind of a win-win.
Nice.
No, I didn't force them to buy Smartsheet licenses, but it
Uh-huh.
certainly made life a lot easier for them too.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because as I said, we run our processes in Smartsheet, and it's a wonderful collaboration tool. I'm not in sales, so I'm not trying to do a
Yeah,
sales
yeah, yeah.
pitch here, but it's a great collaboration tool, and it's in many ways it's really ideal to manage localization, especially
Uh-huh.
with an external vendor. And yeah, the vendor saw that advantage as well. There's actually, if you go to the Smartsheet website and look at the customer stories, you will see who our LSP partner is. So I can also say it here, it's relocalize. And there's actually a relocalized customer story out on the
Mhm.
Smartsheet site,
Okay.
kind of
Good.
like illustrating how they utilize Smartsheet also for their internal processes now, not just working with the Smartsheet team, but also working with other clients.
Right, right, right. No,
So
I've
it's kind of a neat success story, I would say, the win-win for both sides.
understand. And by the way, on a personal level, I've used Smartsheet, not, we don't use it across our organization, but
Mm,
I've used it when interacting on financial tabulations with other organizations. But
mm,
all right. I just have one question of my own. Um, I was at this networking thing. I mentioned that earlier last night, and it had nothing to do with localization. But people of course ask, "What do you do?" And I, give them the elevator pitch for Lingoport, and they're like, "Oh, I remember we did this localization years ago. I did this localization. I was at a company where we did this, and boy, localization really became a boat anchor for the development teams." Those were his words, right?
a boat anchor?
A boat anchor, right, right. So,
Wow.
so, and judging from the question I got before this webinar started, which we answered in the questions anyway, but that's actually a common perception. Like your situation of being welcomed in the organization is actually a little unusual. Um,
Hmm.
you 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 know, um, because with every, PR and all that the developers have to do, they're generally measured really more on, did they get the feature done and was it implemented efficiently and did it pass, code review and was it submitted to master? I mean, you think of that. And so
Hmm.
localization is part of that definition of done, some
Hmm.
status. Um, if localization, like later on, somebody says, "Oh, well, you got all these bugs," their velocity is broken up. I mean, they've moved on to the next feature that they're being measured about. So this localization perception as an anchor is understandably there. If like if you were encountering that kind of a difficulty, what would you say to the development department? It's a hypothetical.
Yeah. Um, I think there needs to be some sort of like company wide goal. Like I mentioned the OKR, and I know that was ideal, but I'm sure you will find something in your company goals or company strategy that has something to do with international, right? Like you will
Mhm,
find something like somewhere you might find something, hey, we need to increase, international web traffic. Now that's kind of outside product development, but just as an example, you will find a metric that says, hey, we need to increase web traffic by 20%.
okay.
And then, you use that as leverage, right? Like you use that to plead your case, right? Like,
Mhm,
hey, look, guys, in order to reach one of these goals here, we need to take international seriously.
mhm,
We can't just how are we supposed to reach this international goal if we don't do anything about it? we're going to miss the goal, and then we're all in trouble. So kind of like put the responsibility a little bit back on them as well. Try to make them feel guilty as much as you can.
Right, right, right. I have also my own answer around, enforceable metrics and processes that I could give a whole webinar on, but I'm not going to do that right now. But yeah, I mean, it really starts with like everybody understanding the opportunity and the problem. I mean, it's sort of like why we have user experiences as a really important domain, and it's really that whole UI UX movement really has made software a lot easier to use over time, and I think no developer won't recognize that. And I just think of localization, it's another extension of that. So
Mhm.
it's all good. All right, so I need to get to the audience questions that just came up, which is great. This is a really technical one here. How do your AI powered QE workflows complement the MQM scoring done by your LSP? Are they used together in decision making or tracked separately?
Oh boy, should probably have somebody from our LSP answer this question.
That's not a
So
naive question, that's for sure.
AI QE is relatively new for
Mhm,
us and was just really implemented recently, literally a few weeks ago.
mhm,
Um, our scoring so far was really focused more on the classic LQA that was done manually as a, the sampling, the typical sampling. You take X% and then have that scored. So I don't think we're really measuring AI QE outputs at the moment. That's all being fine-tuned right now. So a little bit too early to tell. But to answer the last part of the question, we're not using AI QE in the decision-making process yet.
okay. Uh, uh, Last question here. I'm a little confused by what it means, but I'll just read it out. Maybe you understand. Thank you, Karsten, for sharing your expertise.
I
For
understand that
sure.
part.
Can you tell me what are the different domain contents are localizing in Smartsheet? And by domain
Domain
content, I wonder
contents.
if they mean everything from software to marketing to manuals, and I'm not really clear. Ah,
Oh,
got
he just
marketing product.
marketing, product,
Yeah,
etc.
good, good.
Yeah.
Thank
So uh, yeah, product. Um, well, marketing is a very broad term, right? Like so much falls under marketing. But I'll try to double click a little bit on it. So definitely all of our web pages. And when I say all of them, there's so much nuance to that, right? Like we don't localize every single web page, to be clear, right? There are some country specific web pages. There are some US specific web pages. I can't think of a better example, but I think it illustrates the issue. An event page for an event in the US that doesn't really appeal to an international audience. We don't localize, right? So we localize almost everything where it makes sense. That's the generic answer to that. We do localize our support materials, so the entire help site is localized. We have a community that is localized as well. It's a localized interface. What else? We have some training. There's a thing called Smartsheet University that's open to customers at a certain level, and then they have in that Smartsheet University there are courses you can get Smartsheet certified, et cetera, et cetera. That is limited to German and Japanese at the moment. What else? Campaigns are very much dependent on the goal of the campaign and the target audience. SEO is very targeted. Yeah, we do some selected, keyword localization where it makes sense. We focus on the more high traffic pages for that, and et cetera, et cetera. So kind of like another hour filling conversation probably to go into the details there. But
Right.
I think we pretty much touch every asset. I think one thing that we don't do at all is like any type of internal training materials. The understanding is that no matter where you are in the world and you work for Smartsheet, English is still the company language. So you won't find the salesperson in Germany won't find any like sales training in German, although we create customer facing material for them, but just the material they are exposed to internally is definitely not localized. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Deepak?
I'm going to ask his next question here. Oh, he wrote that. Yes, good. In the current economic, this is good. I think it has to be our last question here. In the current economic climate, are you seeing any pressure from your procurement or finance teams to reduce localization budgets, perhaps by shifting more work to AI and automation? That's a good, juicy question.
The answer is yes.
I think that's pretty universal. And it's not just for localization. It's kind of everywhere. So
yeah, we also see a little bit of like vendor consolidation and things like that. Kind of like the usual things and given the current economic climate. I don't see anything unusual that we're being asked to do that peers in other companies are being asked. Right? I think we're kind of like all in the same boat.
Right. Got it. All right. Well, and thank you for everyone for joining us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to everyone involved. Sorry about a little awkward start, but we got that managed. And we'll be back. In the meantime, I expect a few blog posts from Lingoport, newsletters, and that sort of thing. The recording will be sent out. There's nothing you have to do. Kate will get that handled for us. And until September, when we have the next webinar, I hope you can join us then. That should be an interesting one. Well, they're all interesting. And thank you, Carsten. Thanks for your preparation on this. It was very good, and your cooperation with the question list and all that. Take care, everyone, and have a good summer. All right.
Thank you.